You have a reputation for being someone who never relaxes, but do you, and how?
I don't have time to relax very much. And let me put it this way. I'm doing the one job in the world which I really want to do, which I love, and work to me is pleasure. So I don't have very much time, and even the things I do in a way are relaxation. If I have to read things up, it's a relaxation. I love music, I love gardening, and I love just pottering round the house. Now, for a housewife, that's a bore. For me, it is a relaxation. If I've got to turn out drawers, or turn out the airing cupboard, or get the kitchen tidy. It's relaxation for me, and I like it. Or just go through some interior decoration books, or move the furniture around. I'm a great mover of furniture around.
Very good. What makes you laugh, Prime Minister?
Yes, Minister. Yes, Minister. I think it's absolutely marvellous. It's very right, a lot of it. Absolutely marvellous. And you know, recently, I did a Yes Prime Minister, just 2.5 minutes, because one of my own friends and I wrote the script. And it's jolly difficult to write that script, I can tell you. We couldn't keep going for more than 2.5 minutes. And then sometimes you just have to laugh at yourself when things go wrong. Or the House of Commons, you know, you can always have a double entendre, and you really have to be very careful. My first junior ministerial job was with Harold Macmillan, and I was a parliamentary secretary to the Ministry of Pensions. And I worked very hard, and I knew all my statistics, and I went round to all the pensions organisations. And there was a very great issue, there still is. It's the earnings rule. Pensioners' earnings rule, they still want to abolish it. And there's a question of the cost of abolishing it. And I had a figure, and people just didn't think that figure was right. So I said, all right, I will just check. Sent someone to the civil service box to check. And my mind was on the job as it would be. And along came a piece of paper. I was at the dispatch box. So I picked it up and said, looked at it, and I said, I have the latest red-hot figure. Yes, exactly. You're a man. You see, the girls don't laugh. That's exactly the point. Exactly the point. I didn't think of what I was saying at all. The whole place collapsed around me. Collapsed around me. I never done it again. Never done it again.
Well, you are wearing a fuchsia-coloured dress as well this evening. So...
But I was a lot younger then.
You live over the job at number 10. Is it possible to feel at home there?
I sometimes feel as if I started life living over the shop, and I live over the shop now, because people always come up. Is it possible? Well, I'm always on the job. People think of number 10. People think of number 10, really, as the home of the Prime Minister. It really is the office of the Prime Minister. 100 people work there.
It's a huge place,
day.
Isn't it?
It is a huge place. And I have just a little flat at the top, and I love that little flat, and we don't have any permanent domestic staff or anything like that. So when we get up there, we can relax totally.
With the incredible schedule that you have, how do you manage always to look immaculate, particularly on these foreign trips?
It isn't easy. You work them out fairly carefully before you go. And you get a list of the engagements you have. And I just make a note beside which dress I will wear, and then we've worked out which shoes and so on. And the dresses have names, because that's the easiest way. You know, cloudy, English garden, plum lightning, blue stars.
This is
This is just fuchsia, I'm afraid.
It's very poetic stuff. And do the arrangements always go like clockwork, as you are the Prime Minister?
No, I discovered that if you try to get it too organised, things will go wrong. So you've got to get it reasonably well planned, but always be prepared to vary it. Never get it worked down to the very last detail, because it won't work out that way.
Do you have an infallible memory yourself?
I'm lucky. I have a very, very good memory. I was trained as a child to have a very good memory.
I asked you that because I seem to remember hearing about a case where your passport was not quite right and you were dashing off somewhere.
Oh dear, you found out about that.
I caught you out.
In about 1966 or 1967, I was going on my first tour to America, and I was going on a speaking tour for about 6 weeks. And yes, I got everything beautifully ready, beautifully packed, everything that I wanted. And I went down. In those days, there was a very big air station at Victoria. You caught a bus from Victoria. And so I arrived there, handed over my ticket, my passport, And the man said, your passport's out of date. Out of date. But, so I hadn't got a good memory. Fortunately, it's my habit always to arrive early. I had arrived an hour and a half before the bus. So I simply called a taxi, dashed down to Petit France, got a renewal of a passport, got back, got on the bus and caught the aircraft.
I'm impressed.
It's quite different because, you see, I always turn up an hour and a half before. Dennis is very different. He doesn't even get the day right sometimes. Because when we were first married, you know, he always travelled the world to try to get orders to keep the factory going. And he went off on a 6-week tour every year. That was the time when I knew I could get things done in the house when he wasn't there. But I went to see him off, and we turned up at that self-same air station. And he handed over his things, and the girl said, your aircraft went this time yesterday. So he was just absolutely the rest. He wasn't in the least bit flustered. He said, well, you better get me on the next one now, hadn't you? And he got there.
Inevitably, you've faced criticism. Every Prime Minister does. But yours has been particularly spiteful at times. The milk snatcher, Attila the hen. How do you cope with these remarks and the cartoons that are done of you?
Well, the cartoons are very funny. I think the cartoonists are marvellous. Some of the other remarks are, well, they hurt. They'd hurt anyone who had them. And I notice that some of the journalists who write them, if someone writes something horrid about them, they're just as hurt. And I find it very difficult because you will have a journalist around and you will perhaps cooperate as much as you can in an interview. And then sometimes they'll go and dip their pen in acid and write really horrid things. Well, I've learned to live with it because if it looks horrid or someone tells me it's horrid, I won't read it. Now, you might think that's cowardly. It isn't really. I've seen the effect on other politicians of all parties when these horrid things are said. And it doesn't matter how tough a man is, as well as a woman. It doesn't matter how tough they are. They are hurt and they are deeply wounded. I've never known one who wasn't. And I've watched them. And, you know, for the next 2 or 3 hours, they almost can't think of the things before them. And I've said to them time and time again, don't read it. And I know why. Because it bothers you so much that you then are not in a position to make the kind of judgments that you ought to make. So it is a kind of protection, but they do hurt.
At the end of the day in the House, when you and the opposition have been nose to nose and shouting at each other, do you then all go off at the end of the day and say, let's have a drink and Neil, you're on good form today?
I don't think I've ever had occasion to say quite that. You do form friendships across the House. It's that kind of place, and you couldn't quite carry on the business of the House if you didn't. And you can always find friends, some friends among the opposition, and they can find some friends among us, personal friendships, and people to whom you do discuss things.
What weaknesses would you admit to, Prime Minister?
Oh, I think I must have an enormous number, but I don't think I would tell anyone. Mr. Kinnock might be listening.
How are you going to spend your time when you are no longer Prime Minister?
I hope to have a lot of time to think about that yet.
When that day eventually comes, what will you first set your sights on?
I shall have to be very active because that's the way I've lived. I've worked and I love work, and I think somehow, I've never kept memoirs, I've never kept diaries, but I think somehow I will have to get some sort of account together, but then I will just go on helping the things in which I believe. I'll always do that, and I'll just go on helping my own particular good causes.
And on a personal level, more time in the garden?
I would love to build a garden again. Love to. I've built 2. One on an acid soil and one on a limey soil. I'd love to build another.
Prime Minister, it would be, as you say, perhaps rather a long time before you do, but thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. Prime Minister, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.